Welcome back to FOXSOUL's Black Report. Well, former residents of a Native American reservation in Palm Springs, known as Section 14, are seeking more than $2.3 billion in reparations from the city for being displaced during the 1960s.
So this comes after an apology by the Palm Springs City Council in 2021 for its decision to displace them. Now, the reservation was home to Black and Mexican families, and the California Statewide Reparations Task Force is evaluating how the state can atone for policies such as an eminent domain and redlining despite complications due to ownership of the land. Some residents believe it is important for the city to make amends.
And joining us now is civil rights attorney and the lead attorney for the Section 14 survivors and descendants, Areva Martin. Welcome to FOXSOUL's Black Report.
Hello, my friend. Good to see you.
Good to see you always. And so, Areva, tell us, when most people think about the fight for reparations, they probably don't think about vacation destinations like Palm Springs. How did you learn about this case, and what inspired you to represent the plaintiffs?
Yeah, it's a great question, Nee. Most people think of Palm Springs, they think of glitz and glamour and this exotic vacation spot in the desert. But many people don't know that Palm Springs has had and continues in some ways to have this very dark and sordid past. And that was a past where they burned out and demolished thousands of homes that were homes to Black and brown residents who came into the city seeking a new beginning, many traveling from the South to escape the Jim Crow laws of the South, only to learn that California had its own form of Jim Crowism in terms of racially restrictive covenants that prevented Black and brown people from living in neighborhoods with white people. I learned about Section 14 through an advocate who was involved in the Bruce's Beach matter involving Manhattan Beach, California. And like so many residents in California, I was incredulous. I didn't even know that African Americans lived in Palm Springs. And little did I know, as so many other people don't know, there was a vibrant and thriving Black community in Palm Springs in the 50s and 60s. And these were the Black folks who built this town, who made it the city, the destination for the rich and famous that it is today. They were the carpenters, the nannies, the cooks, the chauffeurs, the folks who catered to the rich and famous, who made Palm Springs their second home.
Wow, such rich history and heartbreak all in the same thought. Ms. Martin, tell us, more about the $500,000 contract the Palm Springs City Council is considering to develop as far as a reparations program is concerned. Do the Black and brown families you represent see this as a stall tactic or a meaningful step toward delivering justice?
Well, from our perspective, we have not presented to the Palm Springs City Council our reparations plan. So anything that the city is doing right now is not with the blessings of the survivors and the descendants. And the reality is the oppressed doesn't get to tell the folks that the oppressor, I should say, doesn't get to tell the oppressed what making them whole should look like. We have been engaged in a series of meetings over the last year designed to develop a reparations plan that we will present to the city in June. So any plans that the city have right now for developing anything is, I'd call it good public policy, but it is not reparations, because the survivors and descendants, the thousands that I represent, have not presented this city with a comprehensive reparations program. Like I said, that's going to be done in June. So any efforts afoot by the city at this point, let's just call it good old public policy, because all cities need affordable housing. All cities need investments in its low-income communities, but that is not, by any definition, reparations.
Areva, in November, your law firm filed a claim with the city of Palm Springs seeking between $400 million and $2 billion for your clients. How did your team calculate the economic harm done to these families, and what advice would you offer to other advocates across the country that are leading their own reparations efforts?
Well, first, I would say we brought in a dream team, a team of experts who've been working in the field of racial justice, working in the field of reparations, and an economist. Dr. Julianne Malvo, one of the nation's leading labor economists, is one of the consultants that's helping the families that I represent. Dr. Malvo did a preliminary harms assessment And sadly, the city had never done that. If you think about a tornado, you think about an earthquake or any kind of natural disaster, the first thing the government does is it goes in and does an assessment of the harm that was done by that natural disaster. The demolition and burning out of these families happened 60 years ago. And despite the 6 decades, the city had never done that kind of harm assessment. But Dr. Malvo did it. She looked at the present value of homes in Palm Springs today. If you were to try to purchase a home in Palm Springs, you would have to pay over $1,300,000 to purchase even a single family home in that community. So when you think about what this community lost, it wasn't just the present value of homes, it was all of the generational wealth. It was the opportunity to build generational wealth. It was the lost economic opportunities. There were businesses and cultural institutions on Section 14. All of those were upended. All of those were destroyed because of the intentional racist actions by the city. So $2 billion in some ways, I recognize it sounds like a big number, but when you think about what over 6,000 residents lost, that number doesn't even come close to being able to compensate them for not only the economic loss, but the racial trauma that these families experience that still has reverberations throughout that Palm Springs community today.
And 60 years ago, it might as well, have been yesterday. So with all of that in mind, Ms. Martin, California's Reparations Task Force is expected to deliver final recommendations on this legislation as how they're going to address, this over 300 years of harm via slavery and racism. How does this fight for the reparations on the state level? Does it help or hurt your particular case there in Palm Springs?
Yeah, it's a positive movement that we are seeing all around the country, not just the state of California that's studying reparations for all of the African Americans who live in the state, but we see San Francisco has submitted a reparations proposal to the County Board of Supervisors in San Francisco. Cities like Sacramento, Boston, St. Louis, Missouri, cities all over this country are recognizing that they don't have to wait for the passage of H.R. 40. They don't have to wait for the federal government to act. Local governments can take action. They can stand up. They can acknowledge the role that they played in dispossessing African Americans decades ago. And some of these atrocities are still happening even as we speak. I'll say happening in real time. And need to address your question about advocates around the country. I think what advocates need to do is learn about the efforts that are taking place from Bruce's Beach to Section 14 Palm Springs to San Francisco, what's happening in California, because there's so much to learn. I've learned so much from what happened in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so much of my work has been inspired by one of my Harvard Law professors, Charles Ogletree, and the late Johnny Cochran, who went into Tulsa in the early 2000s to fight for reparations for those families that had been burned out as a result of Greenwood. So there's inspiration in the work that has been done by pioneering civil rights attorneys who've been at this for decades.
Areva, at a recent task force meeting, California State Senator Steve Bradford, he said it'll be an uphill fight to get the legislature to seriously engage with recommendations. Do you agree? And if not, what can our soulmates do to make a difference?
I think it's going to be a battle, but nothing that's worth fighting for comes easily. And the Reparations Task Force and the individuals around the state of California recognize that this is going to be a battle. But look how far we have come. Reparations used to be considered a fringe concept in the 60s and 70s. That was something that those people on the fringes talked about. Now it is a conversation that's happening all over this country, including in one of the largest states in the country, California. What everyone can do is get involved. They can go to that Reparations Task Force website and show its support. I know there are over 150 organizations that have already signed on to the California effort. And likewise in Palm Springs, we have been seeking the support of legacy organizations like the NAACP, the National Urban League, and others. The issue of reparations is going to be an issue decided by the people. The elected officials that will vote in California, those that will vote at the city council level in Palm Springs, they serve at the leisure of the voters. And so it's up to the voters to express their support both at the California level, and I'm asking voters in Palm Springs, allies and supporters, to stand up with us and to stand in solidarity with us as we seek to make these families whole.
Indeed. Areva Martin, civil rights attorney, getting into that good trouble.
That's
Thank
right.
you so much for your time today. We must have you back, especially to follow up on this particular case. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for your time today.
Thanks to both of you as well.
Indeed.